When I first met Ryan, I genuinely thought I had stumbled into one of those once-in-a-lifetime love stories people talk about but hardly ever experience. It was the middle of June, and the city was sweltering in that sticky, restless way that only summer can bring. I had ducked into a little coffee shop on Main Street to escape the heat, and there he was sitting at the counter, laughing with the barista, his smile so effortless it felt contagious. We caught eyes for just a second, and something electric shot through me. It wasn't lust or even infatuation at that point, it was curiosity, like I was staring at a story that was just begging to be told, and I foolishly was eager to read every word of it. Ryan was the kind of man who made promises sound like poetry. He wasn't showy or loud about his affection. Instead, he wove it into the tiny details, the way he always remembered how I took my coffee, the texts he sent when he knew I had a stressful meeting coming up, the small, handwritten notes he would leave on my car windshield when he knew I had a bad day. He had this natural way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary. I fell hard. I didn't even resist it. I didn't want to resist it. Been together for nearly 18 months when he brought up marriage. I remember the night so vividly it almost haunts me now. We were lying on the old, squeaky couch in my apartment, wrapped up in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and detergent. The city lights blinked softly outside my window, and the world felt so small and perfect in ours. He turned to me, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, and said, "You know, I've been thinking, I don't ever want to do life without you." His voice cracked slightly, and my heart cracked right open with it. He promised me that night, promised me a ring, a wedding, a lifetime. He told me he had already started looking at rings, that he wanted it to be perfect, that I deserved everything perfect. And I believed him. God, I believed him with everything I had. The months that followed were a whirlwind of excitement. Every text from him sent my heart racing. Every time he glanced at my hand, I wondered, is today the day? I started casually browsing wedding dresses online, pinning photos to secret Pinterest boards late at night when I couldn't sleep. I even found myself practicing signing his last name next to mine, as if preparing for something inevitable. Everyone around us, my friends, my family, adored Ryan. They would tease me mercilessly about when he was going to propose, about what the wedding would be like. I would laugh along with them, but inside, it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. Then one evening, something changed. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing you could almost ignore if you wanted to. He started texting a little less, making excuses about being so busy with work whenever we made plans. His voice, once so full of warmth, started to sound distant, mechanical. I told myself it was just a phase, that all couples go through ups and downs. I clung to the promises he had made, to the image of him whispering about forever while my head rested on his chest. I couldn't let myself believe that the story we had built together could be anything other than what he said it would be. A few weeks later, Ryan asked if I could meet him at our favorite Italian restaurant, the one where we had our first official date. My stomach was in knots the whole day leading up to it. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, this was it. Maybe he was finally going to propose. I even wore the blue dress he once said made me look like something out of a dream. I did my makeup carefully, hands shaking slightly with excitement. When I arrived, he was already seated at a corner table, looking nervous. His leg bounced under the table, and he kept fiddling with his napkin. I could feel the tension crackling between us. I smiled at him, trying to steady myself, but when he looked up at me, something in his eyes made my blood run cold. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't glowing with excitement, he looked haunted. I sat down, heart pounding, and waited for him to speak. But when he did, it wasn't the proposal I had been dreaming about. It wasn't anything close. Instead, Ryan leaned forward, cleared his throat, and said, almost too quickly, "I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else." My mind raced with possibilities, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what he said next. And just like that, my perfect story shattered into something unrecognizable. For a few seconds after Ryan spoke, I just stared at him, my mind a blank, empty slate. I couldn't process anything. It was like my brain refused to accept that something bad could be coming. I had been so sure this was going to be the start of our forever. I had dreamed about it, obsessed over it, believed it with every part of me. And now, sitting across from him under the soft glow of fairy lights and candle wax, something heavy and dark was descending over us. I booked a trip," he started, his voice low, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke. "I was going to surprise you, for after," he trailed off, and I could tell he was avoiding my eyes on purpose. "For after what?" I asked, my throat dry, barely recognizing my own voice. He swallowed hard. "After proposing." The word hit me like a sucker punch, and for a split second, hope flared in my chest again. Maybe he was just nervous. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe this was still part of the dream. But then he kept talking. "But, he ran a hand through his hair, looking everywhere but at me. "I'm not going with you." Silence, thick, choking silence. "I'm going with someone else." The world tilted. I couldn't even tell you if the restaurant was noisy or silent or if people were staring at us. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart hammering in my chest, the sound of my dreams disintegrating one by one. I blinked at him like if I just kept blinking, maybe I'd wake up, maybe I'd laugh and shake it off like a bad joke. But it wasn't a joke, it wasn't a nightmare, it was real. Someone else, someone who wasn't me. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. It was like my entire vocabulary had been wiped clean. Ryan kept going, filling the space with rushed explanations that only made everything worse. She's someone I met through work, he said, his voice cracking a little. It wasn't supposed to happen, it just did, I didn't plan it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach across the table and shake him and ask how the hell he could accidentally fall into another relationship when he had promised me the world. But I sat frozen, trapped between shock and disbelief, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard that my knuckles turned white. He finally dared to look at me then, and the guilt in his eyes was almost unbearable. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me, I echoed, my voice breaking at the edges. I felt humiliation bloom across my cheeks, hot and angry. You promised me, Ryan, you promised me a future. I know, he whispered. I meant it when I said it, I did, but things changed. Things changed just like that. Like love was some casual, disposable thing you could toss aside when something new came along. Like all those nights of whispered dreams and stolen kisses and stupid, hopeful promises meant nothing. I sat back, feeling like I had been slapped. I realized then that everyone else in the restaurant had faded into the background. It was just me and him, the man I thought I knew, sitting in the ruins of something that used to feel sacred. How long? I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. He flinched. A few months. A few months. While I was dreaming about wedding dresses and signing my name next to his, he had already started building a life with someone else. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't even find the bottom of it. It wasn't just that he cheated, it was that he let me believe in something that had already died behind my back. I was going to tell you sooner, he said, rushing his words now, desperate like he thought maybe he could fix it. But then I thought maybe I could end things with her, maybe I could make it right, but you chose her, I finished for him, bitterness sharp in my throat. He didn't deny it, and in that moment, I hated him for his honesty almost as much as I hated him for everything else. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. People were definitely staring now, but I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see what it looks like when someone's heart gets broken in real time. Without another word, I grabbed my purse and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I knew I'd shatter into 1,000 tiny pieces right there on the sidewalk. I made it to my car before the sobs came, violent, gasping sobs that racked my whole body and left me clinging to the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Ryan had promised me a ring. Instead, he had booked a honeymoon with someone else. And I had never felt more alone in my entire life. The next morning felt like waking up in a different universe, one where the air was heavier, where colors seemed duller, and where every movement felt like wadding through wet cement. I opened my eyes and for a few seconds everything was still okay. That soft, drowsy moment before reality caught up. Then it hit me, crashing down like a wave I couldn't outrun. Ryan, the other woman, the trip he was supposed to take with me. I curled tighter into the bedsheets, wishing I could pull them over my head and block out the world forever. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room, but a bigger part of me, the stupid, wounded part, still needed to know what he had to say. I grabbed it and squinted at the screen. Ryan, I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. You didn't deserve this, please know that. I stared at the words for a long time, feeling nothing at all. I didn't reply. I couldn't even trust myself to type anything coherent. My hands were shaking too badly anyway. I dropped the phone onto the carpet and let it lie there, face down, like some dead thing I didn't want to deal with. The hours stretched out endlessly. I didn't eat, I didn't shower. I didn't move except to wipe away the endless, burning tears that kept slipping down my face no matter how hard I tried to stop them. The betrayal sat inside me like something physical, a lead ball lodged deep in my chest. It wasn't just the loss of Ryan, it was the loss of the future I thought we were building. Every holiday, every shared apartment, every sleepy Sunday morning tangled up together. Gone. Ripped away without warning. Around midday, my best friend Emily showed up. She must have sensed something was wrong. Maybe I had texted her last night during my crying jag, but I couldn't even remember. She let herself in with the spare key I had given her months ago and found me exactly where she probably expected, still wrapped up in bed, hollowed out and broken. Oh, honey, she said softly, and that was it, the floodgates opened again. Emily didn't ask questions right away. She just climbed into the bed next to me, pulling me into her arms like I was a child. I cried into her shoulder, ugly and loud, but she didn't flinch. She just held me tighter, whispering the same thing over and over again. You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. Eventually, when the sobs quieted into hiccuping breaths, she asked, what happened? I told her everything about the promises, the near proposal, the trip, the other woman, the way he had sat there across from me, tearing my life apart with calm, rehearsed words. Emily's face darkened as I spoke, her arms folding tighter around me in anger and protectiveness. He's a coward, she said bluntly when I finished. A selfish, spineless coward, and you're worth 1,000 of him. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel the righteous anger she clearly felt on my behalf. But all I felt was this gaping, ragged hole inside me where all my hopes had been. I don't know who I am without him, I whispered, voice shaking. Emily pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. You were you before him, you'll be you after him too. He didn't make you who you are, he just got lucky enough to be part of your story for a while. That's over now, you're still standing. Still standing, it didn't feel like it, but maybe she was right. Maybe survival didn't look like the movies, maybe it looked like waking up even when you didn't want to. Breathing even when it hurt, putting one foot in front of the other even when the weight of heartbreak dragged at your heels. By the time Emily left that night, after forcing me to eat half a sandwich and drink a glass of water, I felt, not better exactly but less alone. She promised to check in tomorrow, to come by and drag me outside if she had to. I was grateful, even if part of me just wanted to hide forever. Before I went to bed, I stared at my reflection in the mirror for a long time. My face was puffy, my eyes swollen and red, but beneath all of that, there was still a girl who had dreams and strength and a life waiting to be lived. Ryan had ripped a piece of me out, yes, but he hadn't destroyed me completely. He didn't get to decide the end of my story. I did. And somewhere deep inside, buried under the rubble of my broken heart, a tiny spark of determination flickered to life. The days that followed were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. There wasn't a clean break, no sudden moment where everything felt fine again. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was messy, it was slow, and most of the time it was painful. Some mornings I woke up feeling strong, determined even, like maybe I could handle this. Other mornings I barely made it out of bed, the weight of it all pinning me down before I even opened my eyes. Emily kept her promise, showing up at my door almost every day with little missions she invented just to get me moving. Sometimes it was coffee runs, sometimes it was short walks to the park. Once she even dragged me to a pottery class, claiming that making a mess with clay was exactly what I needed. I hated her a little in those moments, hated how she pushed me when all I wanted was to wallow. But deep down, I knew she was saving me in ways I couldn't even articulate. It was during one of those forced outings that something unexpected happened, something that would shift the course of everything. We were at a bookstore downtown, one of those cozy, slightly chaotic ones with crooked shelves and chairs that didn't match. I was wandering aimlessly through the aisles, pretending to browse but mostly just hiding from my own thoughts when I nearly crashed into someone rounding a corner. "Oh, sorry," I said automatically, stepping back, my hands flying up. "No worries," came the reply, and when I looked up, I found myself staring into a pair of kind, warm brown eyes. The guy, tall, with a little scruff on his jaw and a worn leather jacket slung over one shoulder, smiled sheepishly. He looked about my age, maybe a little older. There was something immediately easy about him, like he wasn't trying too hard to be anything he was. "You okay?" he asked, noticing maybe the way my body tensed without me even realizing it. I nodded quickly, too quickly. Yeah, just not really paying attention. He chuckled softly. "Happens to the best of us." I smiled back, a tiny, hesitant thing. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel forced. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, and then, without really meaning to, I glanced down at the book he was holding. It was one of my favorites, a novel I had read 3 times, always finding something new in it each time. "That's a good one," I blurted out before I could stop myself, pointing at the cover. He looked down, then back at me, his smile widening. "You think so?" I was debating it. I'm kind of a sucker for recommendations. Something about his easygoing way of talking made me laugh, an actual laugh, not the brittle, broken thing I had gotten used to hearing from myself lately. It startled me. "Trust me," I said, "you'll love it." He nodded thoughtfully, tucking the book under his arm. Then it settled. We could have just left it at that, 2 strangers colliding briefly in a bookstore, nothing more, but instead he stuck out his hand. "I'm Caleb, by the way." I hesitated for half a second, still raw, still bleeding inside, but then took his hand. It was warm and solid and real. "I'm Lily," I said. "Nice to meet you, Lily," he said, and somehow it felt like he meant it. We didn't exchange numbers, we didn't make any promises, we just smiled and went our separate ways. It was simple, easy, no pressure. But as I walked back to where Emily was waiting by the checkout counter, I realized something startling. My heart wasn't racing in panic. It wasn't aching with grief. It was calm, steady. I hadn't thought about Ryan once during that brief conversation. Not once. Later that night, lying in bed with my window cracked open to let in the cool breeze, I replayed the encounter in my mind. Caleb's easy smile, his kind eyes, the simple human connection that had nothing to do with heartbreak or betrayal. It wasn't love, it wasn't even close. But it was proof of something I had started to doubt, that maybe, just maybe, the world still held good things for me, that not every ending was the end, that there could be new beginnings in the most unexpected places, a bookstore aisle, a pottery class, a city street corner. For the first time since Ryan broke my heart, I let myself hope. Not hope for him to come back, not hope to rewind time and fix what was broken. Hope for something new. Hope for myself. After meeting Caleb, something shifted inside me, not a huge, dramatic change, but something small, something steady. It was like I had been walking through a thick fog for so long, and now I could finally see tiny slivers of sunlight breaking through. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about finding someone new to fill the hole Ryan had left. It was about something even bigger, remembering who I was before all of this, before the promises, before the betrayal. I realized that for so long, I had made my world so small without even noticing. I had wrapped my identity around Ryan like a safety blanket, slowly forgetting the pieces of myself that had nothing to do with him. My passions, my dreams, my messy, beautiful chaos, all of it had taken a backseat to a version of myself that fit neatly into his life plans. Now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I had space. Empty, terrifying space, but also space full of possibility. The first thing I did was make a list. It was stupid maybe, but it gave me a sense of purpose, something to anchor myself to when the loneliness crept in. The list wasn't about revenge or making Ryan jealous or winning the breakup. It was about me, about finding the pieces I had lost and maybe, if I was lucky, discovering new ones. At the top of the list, I wrote, "Try something that scares you." It was Emily who pushed me on that one. One evening, as we sat on her balcony with glasses of cheap wine and a tub of ice cream between us, she suggested we sign up for a rock climbing class. I nearly choked laughing. Me, the girl who once twisted her ankle stepping off a curb, scaling walls. But then I thought about it, about how scared I had been to even leave my apartment after Ryan, about how fear had built a cage around me without me even realizing it. Maybe fear was exactly the thing I needed to run toward, not away from. So I signed up, and 2 days later I found myself strapped into a ridiculous harness, standing in front of a towering climbing wall with my heart hammering in my ears. The instructor, a bubbly woman named Jess, gave me an encouraging thumbs up. I smiled back weakly, silently praying I wouldn't make a complete fool of myself. The first few tries were a disaster. I couldn't find my footing, my arms ached after just a few minutes, and I was absolutely convinced everyone was laughing at me. But then something wild happened. I stopped caring. I stopped caring about how I looked, about how messy and ungraceful and sweaty I was. I stopped caring about failing, and with that freedom, something else happened. I reached higher. I found my grip. I climbed a little farther each time. When I finally made it halfway up the wall, sweaty, out of breath, trembling but grinning like an idiot, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. Not pride in being someone's girlfriend, not pride in fitting into someone else's life. Pride in myself, just me. That night, lying in bed with aching muscles and a sore hand from gripping too hard, I felt a new kind of exhaustion, the good kind. The kind that comes from living, not just surviving. And deep inside, I felt that tiny spark from before growing a little stronger, a little steadier. I kept crossing things off the list after that. Some were small, like trying a new recipe without burning it or going to a museum alone. Some were bigger, like finally applying for the art program I had been too scared to chase when Ryan and I started dating. Every time I crossed something off, it felt like reclaiming another little piece of myself, another shard I thought I had lost forever. And then there were the quiet victories, the mornings I woke up and didn't think about him first. The nights I laughed without guilt, the moments I caught my own reflection and didn't see a broken girl anymore, but someone strong, someone still in the middle of her story. I hadn't seen Caleb again since the bookstore. A part of me hoped I would, but I wasn't pinning my healing on a stranger. I didn't need a savior. I was learning, painfully, slowly, that the only person who could truly save me was myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Because even though my heart still ached sometimes, and even though the scars from Ryan's betrayal would never fully disappear, I was starting to believe something radical. I was still worthy of love. Even if it came later than I planned. Even if it looked different than I imagined. Even if it started with learning to love myself first. It had been nearly 2 months since that night at the restaurant. 2 months since the life I thought I had built with Ryan crumbled in front of me like a house made of matchsticks. 2 months of clawing my way back towards something that resembled myself. I didn't think about him as much anymore, not in the sharp, gut-wrenching way I used to. Now the memories were more like distant echoes, still there, still faintly painful but no longer controlling me. I could breathe again, I could laugh without feeling guilty. I could walk down the street without expecting to see him at every corner. But life, as it often does, has a twisted sense of humor. It was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. I was at the farmer's market with Emily, wandering between stalls smelling of fresh bread, lavender soap, and sweet strawberries. The sun was warm on my face, and for once I wasn't pretending to be okay, I was okay. Maybe not perfect, maybe still patching the holes inside me, but okay enough to enjoy a simple, golden afternoon without the heavy weight of the past dragging behind me. We were standing in line for lemonade when I heard a voice I knew like a song I hadn't listened to in a long time. I turned before I could stop myself. And there he was. Ryan. He looked different, maybe a little thinner, a little more tired around the eyes. He wasn't holding hands with anyone, wasn't laughing that easy laugh that once made my heart race. He was just standing there a few stalls away, scanning the crowd, searching. His eyes landed on me almost instantly, as if some invisible thread still connected us, tugging at his gaze. For a moment, the world slowed. I half expected the old pain to crash over me again, to buckle my knees and make me want to run. But it didn't. Instead, there was just this strange, clear-headed calmness. He started walking toward me before I could decide what to do. Emily noticed and stiffened beside me, her hand brushing my arm protectively. "Do you want me to get rid of him?" she whispered. I shook my head. "It's okay. Because I needed to do this, for May." Ryan stopped a few feet away, looking unsure, almost shy, a shadow of the confident man I had once loved. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his jeans and cleared his throat. "Lily," he said. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. "You look good," he said awkwardly, his eyes searching my face for some sign, some crack he could slip through. "Better." There was so much he wasn't saying. I could feel it pressing between us, all the apologies he was too cowardly to voice, all the regret he couldn't quite wrap words around. But I didn't need his apology anymore. "Thanks," I said simply. A few seconds passed, he shifted his weight from foot to foot. I think about you a lot." I let that hang in the air without responding. Maybe once those words would have shattered me. Maybe once I would have clung to them like a drowning girl to a life raft. But now, they didn't have the power to move me. "I hope you're doing okay," I said after a long moment. And I meant it, truly. Because hatting him would have been too heavy to carry forever. Because I didn't need revenge or anger to feel strong anymore. Because real healing meant letting go, not holding on. Ryan opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but I smiled, a real, kind smile, and turned back to Emily, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop but was clearly ready to throw a lemonade in his face if I gave the signal. "Take care, Ryan," I said over my shoulder. And then I walked away. It was the simplest thing, really, one foot in front of the other. But as I weaved through the crowd, feeling the sun on my skin and the cool plastic cup sweating in my hand, I realized something powerful. I wasn't running from him. I wasn't chasing him either. I was just moving forward. By the time we got to the car, Emily was grinning like a proud mom. "You handled that like a damn queen," she said. I laughed, a real, full-bellied laugh that bubbled up without permission, and realized she was right. I wasn't the same girl who had sat crying in bed weeks ago, lost and broken and begging the universe for answers. I was someone new now. Someone stronger. Someone wiser. Someone who had survived. And I was just getting started. A few weeks after that run-in with Ryan, life started feeling different. Not perfect, not tied up with a neat bow, but different in the best way, lighter, freer. Like I had finally put down a heavy suitcase I didn't realize I'd been carrying for so long. The strange thing about healing is that it doesn't usually announce itself with some big, dramatic moment. There's no parade, no standing ovation when you finally stop aching. It happens quietly, almost sneakily. You notice it in the way you laugh without thinking, the way you plan weekends without a second thought about someone else's schedule, the way you catch your reflection and see someone you actually recognize and like again. I started filling my life with things that mattered to me. I painted badly but joyfully in the small corner of my apartment I turned into an art nook. I volunteered at a local community center, helping kids with their reading homework, remembering how much I had once dreamed of being a teacher. I started cooking again, not fancy Pinterest meals meant to impress someone else, but messy, hearty meals that I actually wanted to eat. Every choice I made, every small victory I claimed, was like stitching myself back together, stronger, smarter, but still soft where it mattered. And then, one rainy afternoon, I ran into Caleb again. It wasn't a grand, faded moment. I was at a coffee shop, curled up with a book and a too-sweet cappuccino when he walked in, shaking rain out of his hair, his leather jacket soaked through. He spotted me almost instantly, his face breaking into that same warm, easy smile that had stayed in the back of my mind for weeks. "Lily Wright," he said, walking over. I smiled back, really smiled, and nodded. "Caleb." He laughed, a low, easy sound that made the dreary afternoon feel instantly warmer. We ended up sitting together, talking for hours, about everything, about nothing, about favorite books and worst movies and how he had once tried to teach himself guitar and given up after 3 days. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people sharing a rainy afternoon like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't tell him about Ryan. Not because I was hiding it, but because Ryan didn't own that part of my story anymore. It wasn't who I was. Not anymore. When Caleb asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime, I said yes, not because I needed him, not because I was trying to replace anything I had lost, but because I was ready to let new things find me. Because my heart wasn't broken anymore, it was bruised, sure, but it was beating strong and steady, full of hope. Hope for myself. Hope for all the messy, beautiful, unpredictable parts of life that were still waiting for me. As I walked home later that evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks glistening under the streetlights. The world smelled fresh, like new beginnings. I thought about the girl I had been, the girl sitting in that restaurant, shattered, the girl curled up on the floor of her bedroom, convinced her story was over, the girl who had once believed that being loved by someone else was the most important thing she could be. I wanted to reach back in time and hug her. Tell her that she was going to be okay. That the pain wouldn't kill her. That life, real, messy, brilliant life, was waiting for her just around the corner. She just had to be brave enough to step into it. And she did. I did. Maybe that's the real love story after all. Not about finding someone else to complete you, but about finding yourself piece by piece and realizing you were whole all along.